Thank you, Sean.
Hello, Darren. How are you?
Great. How are you, sir?
I'm good too. I had thought that this was all ready for public review, and then I realized it is not.
Yeah, we had hoped to have a vote last week. I unfortunately I was traveling. I was in, I don't know, Singapore and Tokyo, and I couldn't make the meetings. So yeah, we're supposed to be any day. But that's really what today is about, is getting to the point of, excuse me, of just moving to public review. We've made all the changes that we discussed 3 weeks ago. So things are ready to go. I've got a blog post ready to, be looked at. So we're just about there, my friend. That makes sense to you?
Yes, yes, it does.
Carly, Cosman?
Hey there.
Hello.
Sorry, I missed the very beginning of it.
Oh,
I
we're
oh
we're just go ahead.
I have a really quick question about a pattern for digital identity. So I want to make a connection with Daryl, and I want to make sure I'm talking to the real Daryl. So I find him in some trust registry. I look up I ask him to prove who he is because I get him to authenticate with his private key, which matches the public key, which is present in the trust registry. But after that, our future communications and authentication would be then done with a peer did, and we would move off the trust registry to keep it private.
Yeah, so two things. This is some of the thinking actually comes out of Drummond's FPP project is um like me being listed in a public registry would be odd. That was the original thinking of SSI is you had to be utterly private, but the fact I am Daryl O on Twitter. But if you could find me, for example, when I was a licensed engineer in Ontario, where you live, if you could find me there, and then you would connect me through, I would call a public switchboard, a public did. You and I
Yep.
then would establish private DIDs to communicate with. Whether those are did peer, did key, did Bubba, doesn't matter. But we would have a
Yep.
private pair to connect with. Yeah.
But then every once in a while, I might want to do a truth check and get you to re-verify with.
Yep. Yeah, and that's totally up to you. That's your
Yeah.
your decision. Um, we see technologies on that, like in IRA, for example, we have some biometrics interest. And you see this in a lot of tech where it's, hey, selfie just to
Hmm.
redo the face scan, or no, I need a full liveness thing. I need you to pull your passport out yet again, whatever. That's your
Yeah.
choice, your risk,
Yeah.
depends on what's going on.
Yeah.
We see that in gig worker economies where it's very
They pass
common
around.
apparently for Carly to get in the car, sign in, and then Johnny gets in and takes over, and Carly's not doing so good because it's Johnny. So there's a is that still
Yep.
you? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Sure.
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Cool. Mr. Drummond Reed, I see you are, I don't know where you are. You have a new
I'm in,
background.
I just I was in a meeting yesterday. I turned off. I'm in San Francisco right now. Get back to Seattle
Cool.
tonight.
Cool.
And I see Cosmo's joined us. How you doing, Cosmo?
Hello. Good. How about you?
Very good. Yes. Doing well.
Cool.
Doing well. Yeah.
All right. So I just jumped onto a different computer. So I'm going to pull up the minutes. Actually, that's right. I did send a note of it to the channel, so I can actually load it up real quick here.
So
Question
while
is,
you're
am I
doing
signed?
that, can I make an announcement while
Sure
you're
can.
futzing around? There you go.
Your
So,
futzing around announcement.
exactly. So I invite all trust registry members to a new task force that I am forming at DIF for the COG, the Creator Assertions Working Group. And I would like everyone here to participate because this is real trust registry development work. So let me explain a little bit and hopefully I'll get you involved. So as all of you may or may not be aware, I am actively involved in the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, the C2PA. The C2PA creates a cryptographically bound manifest of actions taken by products at the point of origin, as well as anytime a product like an Adobe Photoshop wants to make an update, it can be recorded on that digital manifest. Now, the C2PA is responsible for product-oriented changes and creations of these manifests, whereas the Creator Assertions Working Group, which is now operating out of DIF and is a joint collaboration project with Trust over IP, is focused on after products or aside from the products, individuals and organizations making making assertions and making claims about a piece of digital media. And so you could say that Daryl took this picture, or Daryl said that this particular movie fits with this particular metadata. Okay. So the way that trust is being aligned, and we are looking in the cog for how we create assurance around the claims that are being made on these digital assets. Certainly, the C2PA has its own conformance program holding product manufacturers accountable for the spec. What we are doing is creating a structure in the cog for industry to set up its own control and trust infrastructure using trust registries. We have an already established trust registry that's working in the marketplace, that is being driven by the International Press Coalition, IPTC. And we're using that as a model to create a specification and standard for trust registries that want to hold players and users accountable for their attributions to digital artifacts that can be I'd say accredited by an industry. So if you're a member of an industry, if you're a member of the press, BBC says, boom, this picture came from BBC. And the validator would say, oh, we're going to check the trust registry to see if BBC is on the trust registry. So they can make that claim. If they don't, then this industry affiliated validator would kind of bounce that. And so that structure is in place. We want to make that standardized. We want to take what the IPTC has done, and we want to create specifications for trust registries as, coming out of something that's already working in the marketplace. And I need help. So I stuck my neck out and said, okay, let's create this trust, task force. And we have a slot, and it takes place every other Monday at 8. I think it's at 8 o'clock. Yeah, 8 o'clock Pacific time. So contact me. Let me know. I think this is an opportunity to take what we've been doing here in this trust registry and trust registry query protocol and put it into action. If we need that feedback, we need to educate people at this, at the COG group, and potentially also, once we get COG done, then I can take that to the C2PA and say, because we have trust lists and a conforming products list within the C2PA, it is obviously they have never heard of the trust registry query protocol. and that's ready, it's already been used, it's out, it's public, blah, blah, blah. But I'd like to see at some point, it's my desire to get the stuff we've been working on to apply to that, because I think that that would be a great use case in there. But can't do that until I'd say, played around with the COG trust registries, because that has more malleability at this point. So comments, questions, anything,
Did
and
you
then
say, Scott, did you say it was a joint diff trust over IP or just a diff?
it's a joint. That's why anybody here that's here can join that task force, because that working group allows you can just sign up, boom, and then you're a member of diff, and you can work in that working group, which gives you access to the task force. And if I said anything wrong, Drummond will tell me I'm right.
No, Scott, what's the name of that task force?
Well, we've just created, I'd say it's the Trust Registry Task Force within
Okay.
within COG. I mean,
Okay, the Trustworthy Task Force within COG. Okay, got it.
yeah, so we've been working just recently, and I think that that's going to take place first quarter more, is to come up with a conformance program. Now, the conformance program can't be built out in COG. It's too big, and it has to, and we've identified that I think we're looking at industries to police itself. So we're looking at trust registries of trust registries in the COG, in familiar sound, for all you IRA folks.
We're going to have a naming problem.
Okay, then bring
Given
that
your
up.
brief, but you are briefing the Trust Registry Task Force at Trust over IP.
Right.
Just a suggestion, call it a registry task force or something.
I don't know. We haven't, like I said, I mean, Drummond was the one that pinned me down. I think the first thing that we would do in this task force is to figure out a name. So
Yeah, cool.
all we've done
You've identified the need.
right. I created an issue in GitHub. Look at that. And Eric Scouten, my co-chair at COG, said, "Okay, Scott, why don't you run it?" And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna need some help." So I figured I'd come here, and that's it. That's all I've done. Is I have an issue. I could probably find the issue in GitHub and identify,
Yeah,
but
no, it
basically
makes total sense. I'm
okay.
happy to see that the COG has reached this point.
Right. I agree with Sam. Let's call it not that trust registry task force. I love that.
The other Trust Registry Task Force.
It's the COG task force, which I hate the name, but I'm stuck with it. So
I like
anyway,
Cogger.
thank you for and Will's going to be an active member. I know that because he's ready to go. He plays both
Nothing
sides.
better to do, man. Nothing better to do.
That's it. Well, but
Awesome.
I do think that this is going to be, I mean, I'm looking at an avenue to operationalize what we're doing here. And I think this task force and the effort that's happening, as good as it is not going to take root until someone starts using it. And I think that the COG could use it faster than, other groups like First Person Project and others. I think that may take longer for that to kick in.
Yeah.
Because trust registries tend to be a little later, after even governance is figured out.
You need somebody who's operating and thinking about the problems that they've encountered. Definitely. You definitely need the
And
operating problem.
and to be honest with you, this has been something that I have presented to the C2PA, even the executive director, way back a year and a half ago. So it's just, I think this makes perfect sense. Um, and but there may be some morphing. I think what will happen is we get into that task force, and the feedback may come back here for some modifications to the spec. So I'd like to see.
Yep.
I mean, that's another help. That's the best thing I can do for this group is to give you a referenceable opportunity to pressure test this, and that's what I'm hoping to see happen. Okay.
Yeah, and much like we're doing with IRA is pressure testing is the protocol sufficient, and where is it deficient, or where do we have adapting mechanisms so that we can have really good quality inputs for the next versions and stuff. So
Right. And you've got a
okay,
great friendly as my co-chair, Eric Scouten, and so he,
that's too much Seattle.
true. Well, I'm not Seattle again right now, so just so you know, I'm half
Yeah.
Seattle.
Okay.
Yes, it's my
Drummond talks
watery
a little too much
eyes are
Canadian,
part of
but
Seattle. Yeah.
cool. We are quarter past the hour, and
Thank you.
today we're hoping. What Scott, thank you for that. I'm excited to see it happening. Um, Today we have revisited. We tried to do it last week. I apologize, folks. I was in Tokyo and was not thinking about the time zones and whatnot, but I was completely out of pocket for both the North America, EU, and the APAC calls last week, so I wasn't able to meet. What we had intended to do last week was discuss all of the changes that we've gone through that have been circulating for the past, I guess, 2 weeks now. Drummond and I pushed all those changes that we agreed to 3 weeks ago in so that we could go to public review 02 imminently, meaning the real time bounder is when LFDT can get the announcement out on the comms pipe. Drummond, any thoughts you wanted to add to that comment?
No, I mean we're just waiting. I think the only feedback we've had since then is the post that Alex made. So
Yep,
I'm hoping we're going to discuss that.
cool. So the goal today, folks, is to push out to PR02, which really the only changes to be made are to tweak the very much the I will load up the page. Really, the change that needs to happen is to remove this draft text, push that out, and then get the comments where what we have seen before as we go to public review in the past, we get a lot more interest. What ends up happening socially is that there's a lot of groups who are, we're deep down in the weeds, throwing in on this content, working on the specifications. You have a much larger group who is waiting to see on things that are going to happen. And when they hit public review is when people actually put the thing up, take it off the side of their desk, put it on the front of their desk, and start actively working on it. And we've seen that repeatedly, both with public review 01 and the implementers draft. So the goal we have is to get that out there. Alex, I see you on the call. Actually, two admin things. Cosmin and Will, neither of you appear in the when I do the at thing, whatever you will call this, um, Trust over IP. Two things. One, are you both members of Trust over IP? And two, I don't know who to talk to, but you should talk to someone about getting registered in Confluence.
I'm a diff member, and there was a time, if I recall correctly, that it was, I guess, somewhere in the distant past where to be a member of diff was good enough, but if it also requires trust over IP, then just give you the heads up.
I think it does. I'm not certain, but I don't even know who to ask anymore.
It's pretty
Cosmin, are
simple.
you?
I'll put it
Oh, go ahead, Drummond.
in chat. There's just a email
Perfect.
address to use to get going on that. I'll put it in the chat.
Gotcha.
Will.
Perfect. Cosmin,
Thanks, Drummond.
how about you? Are you a member?
To be honest, I don't know. I will assume
Okay.
no.
Yeah.
If that means I need to leave, please let me know.
No, you certainly do not need to leave. Trust over IP has an open observer policy. The one of the key things there is if you are here in an observation mode, please limit your contributions to that, meaning observing.
Okay.
This is principally just so you know why that's there, guys. This is part of the IPR, the IP rights, intellectual property rights protections that Trust over IP. Diff also does the same thing. We are part of JDF, Joint Development
Development.
Foundation.
Yes.
Yeah. We are part of the DADF structure, and that is one of the things that affords the work that we do, the IP protections that's necessary. It's a very lightweight task to get registered, but it also lets us tag you guys in things as well. So you
If
just make sure you get that done.
I'm just checking, I thought Is
And
Affinity a member of LFDT? Because if they are, you'd be covered. I just
I don't
don't
know.
know if Affinity. I thought Affinity might be a member of LFDT. If
I
not,
know
they should
Affinity is
be.
definitely a member at Diff. They're very active at Diff. I'm not sure about Trust over IP.
Right. And I just want to point out something that might be confusing. CLOG is one working group that's a joint between Trust European Diff, and the decentralized Trustcraft working group is another one that's a joint between. So you can be a member of either. This
Right.
particular task force is like 4.5 years old, so it's just a
Yeah,
Trust over IP
this
task
one
force.
is part of the tech stack working group at Trust over IP. So
Right.
that's the not by any means not a red flag. It's kind of just a way, hey, if we can't tag you, there's typically something going on. It also just helps with your just general logging in and stuff like that. So, cool. Sorry, Alex, I mentioned you and then left you hanging there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad Cosmin was also able to join the call. Essentially, Affinity and ourselves have been trying to work on an implementation of TRQP. Um, I think it would be useful to get Cosmin's thoughts from an engineering perspective, but I'll give a bit of context to what we sort of where we got to and why we raised the issue. Um, so I think I was speaking to Volodymyr, who's another engineer at Affinity, and the basically the conversation that we had was that the use of action plus resource was not rich enough to deal with some more complex trust registry sort of formats. So the specific use case that we're looking at is for AI agents. And if you have a trust registry for AI agents, you might need to register lots of information about what that AI agent is sort of authorized for. So if you're using an authorization query, you might say, okay, is this agent authorized for this? And then there's a whole sort of array of different things. So there's capabilities, roles, there's actions and resources. So when we were having our discussion, we thought that action and resources was part of a larger cohort of operations that an agent on a trust registry may be authorized for. So when Cosmin and I think Volodymyr were implementing this, they found that the simplistic action and resource was quite restrictive, and it made it very difficult to create these richer queries because um, there wasn't the ability to add sort of metadata to the query to say, okay, we want to sort of add this expressive sort of context around the query. So the solution that we landed on in our discussion was to expand sort of back towards the original proposal. And to, as you can see on the screen right now, we proposed that to use the language of assertions and to basically structure it so that there was an assertion ID, which would be where do you fetch the assertion from? What's the URI or locator of that assertion? And then the assertion type. So this could be this could be scoped by a particular context. So the way that we were thinking about it is, okay, if you get given a trusted list, maybe the C2PA trusted list would be a really good example. Then there would be a type of assertion which could be this is an optional parameter. So for more complex trust registries, you might say, okay, if an agent might be authorized with a particular sort of with a particular type of authorization, and then there might be a definition for how that type is should be described. So we basically said that the assertion type should be coupled with an assertion type context in the same way that if you specify a type of verifiable credential, you need to link that with a verifiable credential context to basically say this is the semantic structure of this type of credential. So with the assertion types, it's basically what is the semantic structure of this type of assertion and how is that assertion defined? So that when you then make the request to the trust registry, you can pre-fill sort of metadata about the assertion in a way that matches the assertion type context to then be able to create a richer query of the trust registry. Sorry, I used a lot of very complicated language there, and I'm sure people got lost along the way. But the simplistic way of describing this is we wanted to create a way to query rich information about a trust registry, and we thought that action and resource might be too restrictive. I'll pause there, and I'm glad Cosmin's on the call. Um, I don't come from an engineering background, so it would be good to understand from maybe your perspective, Cosmin, from an engineering perspective, whether you saw or sort of what limitations you saw with the action and resource sort of structure.
I will try to use an example. Our, let's say, I don't know how to, a birth certificate. It's a, we all understand what it is. We wanted to model it using the action, the park model. And that's where already I would like to understand kind of where the split is, because using the action model, I don't see how that would fit in, or maybe I'm not following that model.
Yeah, I'll jump in just real quick. Sorry, I managed to, I don't know what happened on my screen. Um, what you're describing to me fits, and this is where when the park model came in, I kind of got whacked in the head. I didn't quite understand what was happening. Then I started to understand and realized, wow. And I think what you're describing fits perfectly in the park model, meaning this, that there's an action and a resource. And to your point, Alex, and one, your issue helped me track what you were saying. Your verbiage was very well aligned. So thank you for sharing that issue in the Discord, which as you see, I put it in the GitHub. The action and resource is intentionally self-contained and restricted. One action, one resource. But that's then the context item is where you can expand upon the things when and if you need it. So as an example, one of the things we know we wanted to put in was time. When am I doing the query? Is this as of noon last week? Is it now? Is it in the future? So that one's actually coded for in the context. The context, though, you're describing, I think that is additional context information that I would throw the following thought, and I would like to throw this back to Drummond because he and Andor really did the park thinking and worked with Phil Windley, and as you may know, Amazon uses this internally, where the context information is where they go and expand the detail. If this is a birth certificate, we have birth certificate style information. And I also know, by the way, that Affinity is using a concept. Glenn and I just recorded a kind of a virtual podcast, your CEO, on birth certificates for AIs. That's a really neat concept, but that's going to have its own unique needs. In comparison to an issuer of driver's licenses, the contexts are utterly different, right? There might be some overlap. But I think the context object is a perfect place for this because if I need additional context, it's there. If I don't need and may not even understand your additional context, what am I doing? But just some thoughts. Drummond, what are your thoughts on the park? How it may apply here?
I'm mostly very interested in actually understanding the use case. What I'm seeing, I read through it. I think I pretty well understand it, but what I sensed was this big impedance mismatch between what we were aiming for, or we have been aiming for with the trust registry query protocol, which was something, quite lightweight, something essentially a DNS for trust type of thing. And why this tweak of going from 3 to the 4 parts to adopt the park model, as I think folks may be aware, the park model is what's behind Cedar, which is, extremely scalable and highly performant and can map very complex policies to simple decision queries. So doesn't fit, and it could between you, Alex and Cosmin, be more specific about, hey, we want to make a query about this, authorization or recognition And I just, there's not enough information yet to understand, well, what does not fit the park model? I mean, I can understand, hey, we'd like a much more general model that's much more powerful. It's like a sequel. And we're like, yeah, but we're not, a sequel would be
That's
way
what
too
Turkle is.
heavyweight for what we're after.
That's what the
See what I'm
famously
saying?
named Turkle is. Alex, you're the one who named it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I guess to answer your question, and Daryl, I think you're right. The context property might be what we were missing here because, but maybe we need to. And I don't know whether it's in scope of the TRQP, but to create some type of structure of what goes in the context property to say like this is how you can add more context to an action
Yeah.
in like a coherent and interoperable structure. Because if you could add more context to an action, then it's
Yeah.
basically the same thing as what we presented with just different semantics. Like our concept of assertion type could be mapped against an action as long as there was an equivalent context to say, okay,
To
this is
provide the
how
detail needed. Yeah.
exactly.
So
So I don't
I'm
think we're too far away from each other, but I also, yeah, would love to hear Cosmin's thoughts on this.
okay. I'd also like to throw, I'd love your Cosmin thoughts. I also want to throw out a where we can do that work kind of thing, because I think this is aligning really well with the IRA card efforts. But Cosmin, let's hear what you think.
Um, I would have a philosophical question as I'm getting up to speed with TR, and my apologies for that. One separation that I feel is an undertone of this discussion is kind of CEDAR has two core concepts. It has the policy and it has the entities, which is kind of data on which the policies work. The way I'm interpreting this discussion is the proposal here is mostly focused on modeling the data, while the TR APIs, as they exist, are effectively making the policy public. They're very explicit. So, to be honest, my question here is, let's take the birth certificate, sticking with that. What actions would exist in the trust registry is kind of first. And the second one is, would two, I don't know how to call them, let's call them clients of a trust registry, should they be able to come up with different conclusions based on the same trust registry data?
I put my hand up just to ask. So I think the answer is no. You want to make sure that any query gets the same response from a trust registry. The question I have going back to the birth certificate is, what is the query? I mean, this is a query protocol. What's the query about a birth certificate that you'd like to make? In other words, what are you querying? What are you asking to be authorized or recognized?
To be honest, that's the question. Let's take a few steps back. We have an agent, it wants to identify itself, it has a birth certificate. Once I am at my first interaction with that agent, I have a birth certificate in my hand. I'm assuming this is a VC that's issued to, the agent, and it has a issuer. And I want to go and follow the issuer up to a trust route. And this is basically where I'm trying to understand the model. What information do I use the trust registry for? What information do I potentially get out of VC? Um, I will stop here. So, is okay, one more. Is the expectation in the current model that the birth certificate itself is a standalone VC, while in the trust registry, I just have information about the issuer?
I think the answer is yes. So the
Yes.
classic example, I mean, sorry, Daryl, do you want?
No, I just said yes. That's all.
Yeah. And I put in the chat, I've learned, unfortunately, this particular Airbnb, my connection can just drop and I come back in about 10 seconds. So if that happens, you'll know what happened. Okay. I was just going to say, Cosmo, verifying issuers of VCs is exactly what, the Trust Registry Protocol is designed. I mean, it's sort of the what I would call the canonical use case, right? You have you've got the birth certificate for, and you want to go. And so the query there is, all right, is this issuer authorized to issue, the action is issue, and the resource is a birth certificate VC type, right? So the resource there is a type of, a type of credential. And so, and you're right, there may be a chain, just like there is in conventional PKI of that that you need to back up and go, well, who was authorized to authorize that issuer, right? As you work the chain, and you should be able to get those queries answered as well. But the birth certificate information itself, the rest of that would not be in the trust registry. All the trust registry would have is an authority statement, a policy that says that issuer is authorized to take the action of issuing, and the resource type. When we say resource, the resource can be a type of resource, right? It can be whatever it's acting on, would be agent birth certificate. Does that help?
I would also ask Alex here if that fits the model.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense for simple authorization queries, like is this issuer authoritative to issue this type of VC to this entity? But I think where maybe the Park model breaks down slightly is kind of what I was trying to explain earlier, which is when you want to have more nuanced queries. So it's maybe not strictly authorization, but it's like, does this entity have this specific capability that has been authorized by the issuer? So it might not be a singular type, it might be a combination of types, or one might be a type role, one might be a type capability. So I think if we can have a way for the query request to be able to take in sort of more complex request data, such as multiple types or two types of different syntaxes, and that gets defined somewhere in the context, then I think we're very close to being on the same page. But if it doesn't allow that, then I think maybe it could be limited in terms of how well it could deal with some types of trust registries.
So I think
Does that
right
make
now
sense? Yeah.
it makes total sense to me. The context object already does exactly that. Here's the maybe the crux of the issue. If I'm hitting, well, imagine I'm hitting an agentic identity birth certificate system, an ecosystem. Okay, I've received a credential from an AI, and I now want to go check against the trust registry, and maybe there's a action is issue, resource is agentic birth certificate, but I also know, because I'm working with that ecosystem, that I have another 7 things I have to provide it. The context object allows me to put those in. They're arbitrary. They're not defined. It's completely optional. Context dot whatever. You have any number of objects. What that means, though, is that the ecosystem that I'm hitting, I have to know about it, which I obviously, if I'm asking that level of detail, I know about it. I know I have a special language to speak to them. So I think the context object helps there immediately. There's also, though, a point at which, let's take, for example, if I take, let's take this agentic birth certificate as a working example. There's a point at which the trust registry query protocol is not the thing. I have to go native. I have to go native into that ecosystem because it's that important to me that I get down to the granular and the minutia and subtleties of that agentic birth certificate ecosystem versus the one next door, which is slightly different and they have their own kind of things. But that's a manifestation of governance and implementation. But the context object would support either, but the details in the context object would be different between those two ecosystems. But you have to know the ecosystem you're talking to. Does that make sense, Alex and Cosmin?
Yes, completely. I think if we could include some examples of how the context could be used
Yep.
to do these types of extensions, because I think the only thing in there right now from the top of my head is to query a certain time. If we could include things like
Yep.
maybe a locator field, which you added, Daryl, as well
Yep.
as this type of maybe layered syntax
Yep.
to go more specific, then I think that would for I think I don't know, Cosmin, if you
Yep.
disagree, but I think for Volodimir's main
I
concern,
think
that
you're
would at least
100%.
map. Yeah.
100%. I would like to throw, I'm going to put a different hat on. I'm going to wear two hats right now. One as the Trust Registry Task Force Chair, one as the Executive Director for IRA. And I want to explain what I'm saying there. You okay if I do a share, Drummond, or do you want to jump in? Just saw
No,
your
no,
hands
no.
up.
I was okay. I was just going to point out that Cosmin put an example. You should go ahead. Cosmin put
Okay.
an example in the chat that I was reading through and basically mapping out. Okay, I see how it would work, but
Yeah.
I'll do that
Yeah.
after you go ahead.
Okay. So I want to throw two different things at you guys. One is, and this is what we've talked about in the past. We're not referring to it as much right now, but is what we call profiles, meaning if I take a look at the Trust Registry Query Protocol, really it is two queries, authorization and recognition. You guys are seeing my screen?
Yep.
So the IRA Trust Registry Query Profile supports both of those, but it adds its own. It adds a way to look at getting and this Cosmin, putting my IRA hat on, you guys have been hitting this. What is the list of entities? What are the ecosystems and what's the context that are being defined? And we likely in the IRA world will have many different contexts, meaning this is a known context that there's an AI birth certificate context. There is a digital product passport context. More concretely, if I look, this is something I worked on through just quickly in a conversation with Scott on the C2PA side. They're already doing authorizations, certificate authority, timestamp authority, and conformant product. Those are the three kind of authorizations, the resources that they use. Similarly, this is actually updated now. I don't know that this is done for action resource, but this fits very, very well with issue, certificate authority, issue, timestamp. I did another one for just hacked it up for checked, where basically if you're looking at these, then these I need to break into action resource. This is an older deck. But that same thing with there, but then we would say, hey, and this is what the context object needs to look like, and here's conformance test to make sure the context object you're passing in is sufficient. But I wanted to run an example that we just did last week with Affinity, with Cosmin, with your shop. Which covers off the why, and then IRA card is a concrete example, much like Scott mentioned in COD. It's a concrete example of how we're doing things. So in this case, imagine a conglomerate who says, I want to do IRA cards. I've got a bunch of companies in my conglomerate, very common around the world. IRA could manage all of the issuers, but that's not what IRA does. IRA connects to ecosystems. So what we actually look for is for their ecosystem to manage their own issuers in the trust registry, in which case they would manage the action of issue, the resource of IRA card, business card. This could be agentic AI birth certificate, in which case the rules may say, and I need more context. And similarly, though, IRA then says, no, you, the ecosystem itself, have the action of manage issuers. IRA card, business card. The business rules say, hey, if Sweet Lane Bank needs to have an issue from its own ecosystem, and we need to check that ecosystem is authorized under the IRA Trust Registry. That's how you start to wire things down. So the reason I suggest we look at doing the work here, there's two places I would suggest doing the work. Doing the technical work at IRA, it really informs what the TRQP 2.1 needs to become, if it does, or we may find that context is sufficient and works really, really well. But additionally, I would suggest that we put in and we've talked about this before in this task force, implementation guidance, like a document that says, hey, here's how to use the context object. But it's not part of the spec. It's just an implementation guidance in the wiki and or blog or in the repo, whatever, however we publish that thing. Just some thoughts on that. Because the context object, I believe, handles everything you're looking for. The hard work is defining your context. Let's stop sharing my screen. Sorry, Drummond. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was really helpful, Daryl, and I'm keen to share this recording. I think with Vladimir as well, because I think that
Yeah.
how the metadata is added into the new version, I think was slightly unclear.
Yeah.
So, yeah, using the context object to define metadata,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we can work with that.
Cool. So sorry I laughed at metadata. I in the dark ages of the 90s, I was involved with some major metadata, and we had talked in this group at one point about a thing called Z39.50, which is a crazy metadata standard. It's awful. But then Scott Perry the other day used a phrase called Dublin Core, and I just about lost my freaking mind. Metadata is very specific to the ecosystem, to your world, which I believe is the right place to do that work because it's comparing to a driver's license world. We're not managing driver's license. We don't know what their metadata is, but nor do we care necessarily, right? But in the context of conducting the business, it's very important to understand the metadata and the contexts that are required to do things. Mr. Reed.
Great. So I I typed something in the chat based on what Cosmin wrote. I do think it maps pretty cleanly, and it does come down to something that I've seen this pattern already, which is um, the more the richer the VC, the more distinction there can be on who's authorized to issue what, right? And so I understand the whole thing of the classification, basically the richer the policies around the resource, the more the park model says, oh, you're going to have to be specific about what set of policies you're applying to a particular query. That's just, the way Park works. But the reason for that is it keeps the protocol really lightweight and performant for both simple queries and, it gives you a way to do more complex queries, but it's very performant for the simpler ones, versus going into a richer query language. Daryl did mention earlier we do have and this is important, Alex, as well. We said, hey, if you want to have richer queries, meaning, more complex actions and more complex resource descriptions, it still fits the model, but you want literally, we call it Turkle, trust-resistant query language, to be used in those two components. And still, you can have the context statements modifying that. So it definitely, I think, that's why my reaction was, oh, I think it can do it because I've seen the Cedar folks that I've talked to, and Phil Windley is one resource if we want to pull into this. He ran the team that did the formal proofs on Cedar at Amazon before he retired out of that. So so I think
Can I add one thing?
yeah. No,
I
go ahead.
would, along the lines of what you're saying about keeps the protocol simple. One of the other things to be is that, if I need this thing, this context, this additional context, I can provide it and I know what it means. Conversely, if I don't need this, I don't need to know about it. I don't need to even see the complexity if I simply saying, are you allowed to issue IRA card, business card? That's it. That's all I need to know about. Two things. When it's warranted, I likely have a lift and I want to understand it. And I do understand it.
Cool. Alex has his hand up, and then I put my hand back up again.
Yeah, so I do think it ties very neatly into the Turkle, the query language. And maybe as an action item for myself, Cosmin, and Volodymyr, we can start thinking about how we would describe a query language that would be suitable for AI agents. And then we can look at how we could embed that in the context section in a way that, you know, fitted, it wasn't obviously necessary for all requests, but it could be used for very specific AI requests. And what we would want to do is maybe do something that wasn't generic to the ecosystem, but maybe was generic to ecosystems of AI agents, and people could sort of
Yeah.
subscribe to a certain query language for particular types of queries.
Yeah, and that's the model that when Drummond wrote the special network effects paper, we talked about that the things at the global level are generally they have to be simple, but at a at a less broad but a broad industry basis, you can get very, very, very specific, and that's I think where you would learn what the query language needs to be. I would add the following thought, Alex, and I, which I really like, which is this, is that now the query language separates nicely, cleanly from the query protocol when you're providing the context to the query language. You're basically saying, the query language is here, here's the parameters I need you to use. And that to me feels initially like a really beautiful separation.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to say that, we to reassure both you, Alex, and Cosmin and Vladimir, who, by the way, has been putting out some fantastic writing about agent architecture. I literally had 4 references to Vladimir's article sent to me last night. I'm like, who is this guy? Oh, it's Vladimir. So pretty cool. We've been talking for a while. We know that TRQP is, that it's entirely possible, just like many other things we're doing at TrustRP, that it is AI agent infrastructure that's going to finally pull all this stuff into broad usage. It's literally what we've been designing the whole TrustRP stack to support. Is that's this kind of much more decentralized and very scalable trust infrastructure as a whole. Trust registries are just one piece of that, but they're a critical piece, which is why we started this task force like 6 months after we started TrustRP. So this is a long way of saying I'm hugely interested as one task force member. I think a bunch of us are in. Yes, how is this going to be used for exactly what you're working on, right? The whole agent infrastructure, agent birth certificates, agent authorization, agent delegation. And so I was basically volunteering to say, hey, I'd be happy to have a separate one-on-one or deep dive meeting with you to go over those use cases and just to understand them and make sure that they were aware for other things we're working on at Trust ORP, like the trust spanning protocol or the decentralized trust graph working group, where we're absolutely going to be dealing with, we're defining specific VCs to establish, trust graphs between any set of entities, including agents. So just wanted to volunteer to help with that. What was that, Daryl? I just saw something about official IRA card schema. That looked pretty cool.
Carol,
Yeah.
we're seeing your email. Maybe take that off.
I'm sorry. I was looking for something here. We're at the point where, Drummond, what do you feel about calling for consensus to move to public review?
Well, I feel fine about it because public review is still,
Yeah.
an opportunity to, I mean, if we hadn't said, hey, let's go to that, I'm not sure we would have gotten, Alex and Cosmin and Vladimir weighing
Yeah.
in. So
It
public
brings
review is not
eyeballs.
final. And the other reason we wanted to get to it before, the holiday period is people often take time to look around at things during that period. So anyway, I'd still propose that we say, hey, let's get this out as the next. It's PR02 is what it comes down to. Public review
Yeah.
draft 02.
Yeah. Do we have any dissent for going for that? As you know, we're a consensus-driven org. It'd be good to get the eyeballs. I'm really looking forward to the eyeballs coming in because this is the the key moments. I remember the last time we went to this, it was nice, really nice to see the open ID world lean in because we reached that bar. And then they can only pay attention to so many things, and hitting public review was a marker that caused nice, really good input. Did I see any? I thought I heard a click or something, a hand up, or maybe not.
Daryl, can I ask one thing? Is there a blog, have you prepared a blog post for LFDT to make such an announcement if everyone's on board with
Yeah,
taking it?
it
Oh,
needs eyeballs. I haven't finished it, but it needs eyeballs, and then get it to the. Is it Tomas? Is the comms person Carly? Do you know?
I think he is. I think
Okay,
he is. Yeah, it's between him and Ben. I
cool.
cool.
would work
I've
with Tom.
Daryl, if you want this reviewed, do you want to put a link, like, I don't know,
like
someplace?
like right there.
Oh, like in the, okay.
Um, uh,
Could someone copy that into I'm not on that page right now, into the chat, and that way I'll get it into a tab, and
and
tabs are the new action item list.
Yeah,
Daryl, for the
yeah.
just for the blog post and stuff like that, can we somewhere in here, can we tell a story of an example that is worked through? Because I find a lot of times I'm missing examples, and that's how I understand things, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Like if you can conceptually get it, but example like a tedious detail example, I find really helpful.
It,
And
it
Maybe
Carly,
I'm
certainly
just to be
is
clear, you're
helpful.
talking
It
about
makes for a very
in the
detailed blog
spec.
post.
Are you talking about
What's
blog
that?
post or the spec?
Well, if there's an example in the blog post, that could work. But just do you have it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, because you're like the identifier being queried and stuff like that. And then the example could be here's a did, somebody's did. I'm going to query the trust protocol to see if Daryl O'Donnell, whose did is this, is blah blah. I know it's really basic, but and if not here, then somewhere else in the thing. But gosh, I wish
Here's
that
what I can do. I
yeah.
can commit to producing a blog post on the IRA website that does that.
Okay.
When I say it needs to be in context. We have
Yep.
a very concrete context that we have fleshed out. Are you a valid issuer of an IRA card, business card? What
Yep.
are the steps you need to check on that? We have that one well documented and it's
Okay.
concrete. What I don't think is appropriate is for Trust over IP to use the IRA card, business card
Yep.
example. It's
Yep.
because I wear two hats. I don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe I'm just overprotective.
No, no,
But
no.
it is
That
concrete.
sounds.
It's also helpful for my community at IRA to have
Yeah.
this concrete working example, which we've got in diagrams, we've got in slides, but what we don't have is a post. That's actually a forcing
Okay.
function that I can do. And we can link to that from the art from the
Blog
blog
post to
post.
say if
Yeah.
you want to see more specifics, a more
As an
specific
example of
example.
how this is used.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Daryl, another simple thing is, I just thank you for that. I added a comment as a reminder, and I'll put it on my action item list. Just add an example of the blog post or one or two. I mean, and
The
I would
difficulty,
volunteer to
Drummond,
help with that.
is here's the problem. You're creating a developer level documentation in a blog post that's going to cause a delay.
But
And the reason
Daryl,
I say that is here's what we've learned. When we've gone and explained the overall flow to teams like Cosmin, it's not a half page thing. It's a multi-page developer level documentation piece that is going to be an interesting to fit that into a blog post that drives readership as opposed to people's, oh, this is developer level stuff. I don't want to touch it.
so I just looked at the blog post. I'm just talking about adding a simple example of the blog post, not a flow through. What Carly's looking for is, well, give me an
Well,
example of how this would actually be used.
multiple levels of explanation and exemplars are good. So we could in here put in a very short story as an example without getting into any of the details as well. Because I
Yeah,
find,
that's what I'm talking about. It's like it's
yeah,
literally one heading with like two paragraphs after it. It's just, just
Can you propose the text then?
yeah, that's what I'm
Here's
saying. I'm
here's the reason.
volunteering.
It's the this is you've seen me use the diagram before of I need to know if that's a picture of a bird. And then,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
need to know
no,
if it's
we're
a
talking
picture of a
about a
bird in a national park. Okay, one's a half an hour of work, the other was 3 years of research with four researchers.
what I'm literally proposing is exactly the same, just a simple example of exactly the
Okay,
question we talked about earlier on this, which is the class example of how do I know a particular, and I'll just pick an example,
cool,
that we use all the time, and I'll put it in there. And I
perfect.
can't do it right now because I got to get on another call, but I'll
Yep,
get it done, in the next 24
awesome,
hours of that.
perfect,
Okay.
perfect.
All right.
So what
Thanks,
I
everyone.
heard, what I'm taking away from this is we are good to go, barring the blog post, and we can start circulating it once the blog post hits out. And we're talking about a 30-day review period.
Yes, which is perfect
Yeah,
because then we can
and that'll be
get a
just
few
after the new
holidays.
year, so that's good timing after the holiday break and stuff. Cool. It's an awesome time. And Alex, Cosmin, let's have a chat soon on how we can force the work and thinking that's necessary in a helpful way, um, of learning what the context and metadata need to be.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
think we'll go away and discuss this with Vladimir, and he can listen to
Perfect.
the recording as well, and then we can
Yeah.
go from there.
And please feel free to loop me in either my IRA or Trust over IP capacity or both.
Yeah, awesome. All right, right. Thanks, everyone. Have a
Perfect.
good rest of your days.
Thanks, everyone.